Bible verse for today from Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. And this is what it says. In the time of King Herod, when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem asking, "Where is the child who's been born, King of the Jews? For we have observed his star at its rising. We have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and the scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea, for it was been written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child. And when you have found him, bring me word so that I may go and pay him homage." When they heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. All right, interesting Bible verse, and it's part of the popular Christmas story that we all know. We read about the wise men following the star, and they arrive at a stable, and there they see Mary, Joseph, and the baby. It's a beautiful picture. You see the paintings, stained glass, all kinds of stuff. And that's kind of what we think of when we think of the Christmas story. But we have to also remember that this happened about 2,000 years ago, and there was actually a little bit more of a timeline to it. If you read closely, you can actually see that the wise men did not find Jesus till well after he was born. And you notice they actually, when they arrive to King Herod, they say, "Well, where is this child that has been born?" So Jesus was probably actually at least a few days to a few weeks old when the wise men finally do arrive to Jerusalem and talk to King Herod. Now, the wise men coming to Jerusalem looking for the new king is quite significant. And I want to spend some time on that. So now if you picked up when I was reading, I emphasized a few words in there that King Herod was actually a little frightened, and so were the people of Jerusalem. So you have to ask yourself, why would they be scared? Well, we're going to talk about that. The reason part of this is while it sounds like a nice little beautiful story, there's some stuff going on that has some really huge consequences. But at the same time, it shows that God has a purpose. And no matter what is going on in our human world, all the political stuff, his purpose will still happen, no matter what. So getting an understanding of what's going on, let's learn a little about King Herod. He was actually, there's a few King Herods in the Bible, and he was actually the first one. He's called Herod the Great. His sons, and one of his sons, his grandson, were actually kings after him. King Herod Antipas, he was actually mentioned in the New Testament. There's also one of his sons, another Herod, who was on the throne, and John the Baptist was beheaded. I don't know if you remember that story, and also when Jesus was crucified. Another Herod, but in the same line. Now we do know this King Herod, the one we're talking about now, had at least one of his wives killed and 3 of his sons. And the reason is he thought they were conspiring against him. He would not challenge any risk to his throne whatsoever. And in fact, all of the rest of his sons, he tried to have them killed as well. And he sent them to Rome to make it look a little more legit. Instead of just doing it himself, he sent them to Rome for Rome to crucify him. But the leaders in Rome eventually sent them back and told him he needs to reconcile with his sons. And Rome didn't do this because they were ethical and all that. Rome was interested in the stable countryside, specifically Jerusalem and Judea. And what happens when a king kills all of his sons? What happens when he dies? Who's going to take over? Whoever's got the strongest army, sometimes there's a civil war, they didn't want any of that. So they sent his sons back saying, "You pick one of them will take over for you and lead. You know why? We're going to have a peaceful transfer of power. Everything's going to be smooth." So that's actually what was going on at the time. It was in Rome's interest for Judea, Bethlehem, Jerusalem to be very smooth at that time. Now, Herod was actually quite a smart guy. The way he got kingship in Judea was that he traveled to Rome beforehand, and he pleaded his case to a guy named Mark Antony. You ever heard the name before? And said, "I'll be a good ruler, I'll keep the peace." So that's eventually how he came to power there. And once on the throne, he was very effective, but he was always paranoid about losing power and being overthrown. And hence that's the reason he had one of his wives, several of his sons, not all of them, because he thought they were conspiring against him. Now, the reason I tell you all that backdrop is, now can you imagine 3 men, wise men from another country, coming into your city, standing before your throne and telling you what? A new king has been born. Oh, now you can see why the king got nervous and the whole Jerusalem got nervous. Why? He's got to find out who this is and wipe them out. This is a really big deal. So do you think that'd be good news or bad news? Bad news. It's very stressful. What happens to kings when they feel threatened to the throne? They act out. They lash out on those threats. They eliminate those threats. So it actually made a very tenuous situation a little more stressful. But not to worry. God has a plan. This didn't happen by accident. He just didn't roll the dice and this was the year. Everything happens for a reason. And God wouldn't let Jesus be born into a time period like this unless it was the right time, no matter what. So what's even more interesting is the wise men coming to this place, Jerusalem, they came from another country. You want to learn a little about them, they also worship another god. We believe they were Zoroastrians. You ever heard that term before? If not, look it up on Google. It's totally fine. But God chose them and called them to this country. And when they arrived there, they announced a new king had been born. Only this king and his wise men had no idea. So what do? They start looking in the religious text to figure out where this king is going to be born, this new king. What's interesting, though, if you're the existing king, how good are your wise men, your own wise men, if they can't tell you about the Messiah being born? Not very, right? So when Herod sends his wise men, his own religious scholars, back to the religious text of the day, they start looking through them to find out where the Messiah is going to be born. Let's go to our first Bible verse, because it tells them. In Micah, chapter 5, verses 2. This is in your Old Testament, too, if you have one at home. So imagine yourself as King Herod and his scholars trying to figure out where the Messiah is going to be born. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. For from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel. So 2,000 years ago, King Herod and his followers figured out it was going to be Bethlehem. Bethlehem. So they tell the wise men. And the wise men then look and they follow the star. And where does the star lead them to? Bethlehem. Now what's interesting is, this is why it's divinely inspired. No king in history, no person in history has been able to command the star to follow their lead, right? Only God can do that. So the Bible, the Old Testament, actually matched up with where God would send them. What's interesting is God did not tell the existing king or his religious leaders anyone. He chose 3 men from a distant country who probably spoke a different language and we know also worshiped a different God. And he chose them to come to Jerusalem and announce that the new king had been born. Now, what's great is they were humble enough to do that. They followed the star across distant lands to new countries they may not have been, and they begin to worship this new king, this new Messiah that was born. Now this is significant actually because we need to know and remember that God will choose whoever he wants to choose to accomplish his plans. No matter where they're from, what they've done, what language they speak, or if they have a different religion. They can still answer God's call because he still wants to bring all people to him. Just because someone is different than us, again, speaks a different language, or they have a different God or religion, does not mean that God does not want them to come into the fold. The message of this new king, Jesus, the one that was to be born, is for all people. And the wise men, the 3 wise men, were no different at all. And God doesn't play favorites in any way. So not only did his angels tell shepherds in the fields, he told 3 wise men from another country. And they traveled to this place. Now I'm sure the wise men, when they arrived in Jerusalem, they had this message from God that a new king was going to be born. He'd be born probably in a palace or something magnificent, right? But they arrive in Bethlehem, what do they see? Let's go to the next slide. Jesus was in a stable. And that is actually a picture of a 2,000-year-old manger. It's not in Bethlehem, it's right outside of Jerusalem. But that's what it would have looked like. We think of something like a nice piece of wood. It was actually more than likely a stone manger. You know why? They last so much longer. You can't go to Lowe's or Home Depot back then. All right? And that's why, because that's still there 2,000 years later. You think a wooden manger would not still be around. But yet when the wise men arrive there to Bethlehem and they see Jesus, it doesn't faze them. You know why? Because they now believe in God. They followed his command. They followed his call in their hearts, and they've seen the new Messiah. These 3 wise men from another country, another religion, begin to worship Jesus. They bow down before him. Now, if we go back to King Herod, remember, his own wise men, his religious scholars, looked at the same Bible verse that we just did from Micah. They learned the Messiah, the new king, would be born in Bethlehem. But who are the only people that traveled to Bethlehem to see this new king? The three wise men. King Herod, none of his religious leaders, none of his scholars go there as well. This is the reason why God chose not to tell them at all. Because they weren't interested in God anymore. They weren't following God. They were following their own political ambitions at this point. So God was speaking to whoever would listen. Now what's important is, let's go to the next slide. This is a Bible verse that has always been special to me. Because we need to remember that Jesus is here for all people, no matter where they're from. And think of the wise men in particular when we read this. In John chapter 10. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep, and my sheep hear me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. I have other sheep that are not of this pen. I must bring them also. They too will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock. There will be one shepherd. This is everything about why Jesus was sent into this world, for all people. Even people that speak a different language, from a different place. All people are called. Now I have a question I want to ask. I ask this to a lot of people when we get into good religious discussion. A lot of people that say they're Christian. Have you ever felt God in your heart? Have you felt called to be here? Everyone's here for a reason. Hopefully because it's not because you think we take attendance and I'm going to know it. All right? First of all, we don't take attendance. I have no idea. We want you to be here for the right reason, because you want to be here. Because you feel called in some way to grow in your faith, to be part of God's church. That's God speaking to you. That's God calling you the same way he called the wise men to travel away from their home. That same feeling. So the story is part of the Christmas story, and it's a wonderful story. But what's so significant about it is that God called people from another country, another language that worshiped another God, to make sure that they knew about Jesus the Messiah as well. So in this church, we always remember that all people are worthy to know about God, to know about his forgiveness and his love, and they're welcome in this church. So I have always found a lot of comfort in the fact that these three wise men were called, because they were so different. And they came into a really politically dangerous time, but they still did it all the same. And when they found the Messiah wasn't in this huge palace, they weren't going to get anything out of it, where did they go? They went to a small town on the outskirts of Jerusalem. They saw the new Messiah in a manger. But yet he was the one. There was a reason they were called. So this message of Jesus Christ being for all people is what Christianity is about. That all people have worth, all people have a chance, and that we, as part of his church, have the privilege of sharing that message, of helping each other in our faith, helping people in this community know, and throughout the world know that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. He's here for us. No matter what they have done, no matter what you have done, you have a place in God's kingdom. Amen.